There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. Moments so devastating that you can pinpoint the exact second your world changed forever. For me, that moment came at Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by my entire family, when my parents looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer their son. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how one calm sentence destroyed the family that destroyed me first. The invitation had come 3 weeks earlier. My mother called, her voice carefully neutral. "We're doing Thanksgiving at the house this year, the whole family. We'd like you to come." I should have heard the warning in her tone, the formality, the distance. But I was naive enough to think that maybe, just maybe, things were getting better. You see, my relationship with my parents had been strained for 2 years. Ever since I'd made a choice they didn't approve of, a choice that, to them, represented everything they'd fought against their entire lives. I'd walked away from the family business. The Anderson family had owned a successful manufacturing company for 3 generations. My grandfather built it. My father expanded it. And I was supposed to inherit it, run it, and eventually pass it on to my own children. That was the plan, the expectation, the unspoken contract I'd been born into. But I didn't want it. I'd never wanted it. I wanted to be a teacher, to work with kids, to make a difference in individual lives rather than manage profit margins and production schedules. When I told my parents I was leaving the company to get my teaching certification, my father didn't speak to me for 6 months. My mother would call occasionally, always trying to convince me to come to my senses and stop throwing away my future. But I didn't back down. I got my teaching degree. I got a job at a middle school in the city. And I was happy. Genuinely happy for the first time in my adult life. My younger brother Marcus stayed with the company. He'd always been more suited for it anyway. Ambitious, competitive, comfortable with the corporate world. My parents praised him constantly, their responsible son, their family man. Meanwhile, I became the disappointment, the cautionary tale, the one who chose passion over duty. Still, when that Thanksgiving invitation came, I hoped it meant reconciliation. I hoped that maybe enough time had passed, that maybe they were ready to accept my choice and have me back in their lives. I was so wrong. I arrived at the house on Thanksgiving afternoon. The driveway was packed with cars, my brother's Mercedes, my aunt and uncle's SUV, my cousin's vehicles. The whole extended family was there. Inside, the house smelled like turkey and stuffing. Voices and laughter filled the rooms. For a brief moment, it felt like old times, like I belonged there. My mother greeted me at the door with a stiff hug. My father nodded from across the room but didn't approach. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you, Alex. Been a while." "Yeah," I said. "Too long." We made small talk. I answered questions about my teaching job, though I noticed people's eyes glazing over when I talked about my students. They asked out of politeness, not interest. Then dinner was served. 23 of us crowded around the extended dining table, the children's table set up in the adjoining room. I found myself seated between my cousin Rachel and my Uncle Tom, not near my immediate family. That should have been my second warning. My father stood to give the traditional Thanksgiving toast. He raised his glass, and the room fell silent. "I'm thankful for family," he began, "for the people in this room who understand loyalty, who understand what it means to honor the sacrifices of those who came before us." His eyes found mine across the table. And I knew. In that instant, I knew why I'd been invited. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about something else entirely, something much worse. My father continued his toast, but his words had taken on an edge, an accusation disguised as gratitude. "I'm thankful for children who respect their parents, who don't throw away everything they've been given because they want to find themselves." He made air quotes around those last words, and a few people chuckled uncomfortably. My mother touched his arm. "Robert, maybe we should—" "No!" He shook her off. "It needs to be said, in front of everyone, so there's no confusion going forward." My heart was pounding now. Around the table, relatives were exchanging glances. My brother Marcus was staring at his plate. "Alex," my father said, addressing me directly now, "you've made your choices. You've rejected this family's legacy. You've rejected everything we tried to teach you about responsibility and duty." "Dad, I didn't reject anything. I just chose a different path, Bo. You rejected us." His voice rose. "You walked away from a company that's been in this family for 70 years. You chose strangers' children over your own family's future. You chose your own selfish desires over your obligations." The room was completely silent now. Even the children in the next room had gone quiet, sensing the tension. "I tried to be patient," my father continued. "I thought you'd grow up, realize your mistake, come back where you belong. But it's been 2 years, and you're still playing teacher, still wasting your life." "I'm not wasting my life," I said quietly. "I'm happy. I'm making a difference." "A difference?" My father laughed bitterly. "You make $35,000 a year teaching other people's troubled kids. Marcus makes more than that in a month running the company you abandoned." My Uncle Tom shifted uncomfortably beside me. A few of my cousins were staring at their plates, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. My mother stood up. Her voice was shaking, but determined. "We've decided," she said. "Your father and I, we've decided that we can't keep pretending everything is fine when you've rejected everything we value." "What are you saying?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "We're cutting ties," my father said flatly. "Effective immediately. You're no longer part of this family. You won't be invited to gatherings. You won't be included in family decisions. And when your mother and I pass, you won't be in the will. Everything will go to Marcus, who's proven he deserves it." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "You're disowning me," I said slowly. "At Thanksgiving dinner, in front of the entire family. We're making clear what you already chose," my mother said, but I could hear the tears in her voice. "You left us first, Alex. You left us for a job that anyone could do. We're just making it official." I looked around the table, at my aunts and uncles who wouldn't meet my eyes, at my cousins who looked anywhere but at me, at Marcus, who finally looked up with an expression I couldn't read. "Does anyone else want to say anything?" I asked quietly. "Anyone want to defend me? Tell them this is insane?" Silence. 22 people, and not one of them spoke up. "Fine," I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. "I'll go, but before I do, I want to say one thing, just one thing, and then I'll never bother any of you again." My father crossed his arms. "Make it quick." I looked at each of them. These people I'd grown up with. These people I'd loved and trusted and thought would always be there for me. And then I said the words that would change everything, the words that 3 months later would bring every single one of them to my door, pale-faced and desperate. But at that moment, standing in that dining room, they had no idea what those words would mean. None of them did. I took a breath. The room was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. "I want you all to remember this moment," I said calmly. "Remember that you sat here and watched as my parents publicly disowned me for the crime of choosing my own path. Remember that not one of you spoke up. Not one of you said this was wrong." "We don't need a guilt trip," my uncle started. "I'm not giving you one," I interrupted. "I'm giving you information because there's something none of you know. Something I've been keeping quiet because I didn't want to make a big deal about it. But since I'm apparently no longer family, I suppose it doesn't matter anymore." My father's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" 3 months ago, I said, I was contacted by the State Education Board. They were looking for teachers willing to pilot a new program, a mentorship initiative for at-risk youth. It's funded by a tech billionaire who grew up poor and credits one teacher with changing his life. I could see confusion on several faces. They didn't understand why I was bringing this up now. The program needed someone with experience working with difficult students. someone who actually cares about making a difference rather than just collecting a paycheck. They interviewed 50 teachers. They chose 5. "That's very nice, Alex," my mother said impatiently, "but I don't see—" "I was one of the 5, I continued. "And 2 weeks ago, I found out that the program was being expanded. And they wanted me to help lead it, to develop curriculum, train other teachers, oversee implementation across multiple schools." My brother Marcus looked up sharply. He was good with numbers, and I could see him starting to calculate. "The position comes with the substantial salary increase," I said, "along with speaking engagements, consulting fees, and eventually book deals when we publish our findings. The program is already being featured in education journals. National media is interested." "How much?" Marcus asked quietly. "The base salary alone is $250,000, I said. "But with the consulting and speaking fees, it'll likely be closer to $400,000 in the first year, more after that." The silence in the room had changed quality. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was shocked. "But that's not the important part," I continued. "The important part is that I'll be shaping education policy. I'll be influencing how we teach vulnerable kids across the country. I'll be making a real, measurable difference in thousands of lives." I looked at my father. "You said I was wasting my life, that I chose strangers' kids over family legacy. But here's what you don't understand. I'm building my own legacy, one that's not about money or manufacturing plants. One that's about actually helping people." "You never told us about this program," my mother said faintly. "I was planning to tell you tonight, actually," I said. "I was hoping this dinner was a chance to reconnect, to show you that my path isn't a failure, that I'm not the disappointment you think I am, but instead, you publicly cut ties with me." My father's face had gone red, not from anger this time, but from something else, embarrassment maybe, or realization. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice still calm. "I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to continue building the life and career I chose. And when the media interviews me, when the articles are written about the teacher who's revolutionizing how we help at-risk youth, my last name will be in print. The Anderson name, the one you claim I've dishonored, will be associated with education reform and social change." "Alex," my mother started. "I'm done," I said simply. "You wanted me out of the family. Congratulations, you got your wish." I walked to the door. Not one person at that table tried to stop me, but I could feel their eyes on my back, and I could sense the shift, the realization spreading through the room like spilled wine soaking into a tablecloth. They'd just made a terrible mistake, and they knew it. I didn't cry until I got to my apartment. Then I sat on my couch in the dark and let the tears come. Not because I was surprised by what my parents had done. On some level, I'd been expecting something like this. But having it happen in front of everyone, having my entire extended family watch in silence as I was cast out, that hurt more than I'd anticipated. My phone started ringing within the hour. My cousin Rachel, then my Aunt Linda, then my Uncle Tom, all of them calling to say they were sorry about what happened and they didn't know it was going to be like that. I didn't answer. If they'd wanted to help, they could have spoken up at dinner. Their apologies now meant nothing. The only call I answered was from Marcus, my brother, the golden child who'd done everything right. "That was brutal," he said without preamble. "I had no idea they were planning that." "Really?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "You didn't suspect anything when they sat me away from the immediate family? I thought they were still mad. I didn't think they'd actually disown you in front of everyone." He paused. "Is it true? About the program and the salary?" "Every word." "Jesus, Alex!" He sounded genuinely shaken. "You're going to be making more than me within 2 years. Dad just cut ties with his son, who's about to become a nationally recognized education expert." "Not my problem anymore," I said. "They're going to regret this." "Probably, but it doesn't change what they did." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. What you're doing, it matters. More than the company does." That almost broke me again. "Thanks, Marcus." I should have said something at dinner. I'm sorry I didn't. Yeah, I said. You should have. After we hung up, I turned off my phone. I needed space. Time to process. Time to grieve the family I'd just lost. The next few weeks were strange. I threw myself into work, into the new program. My students needed me, and focusing on them helped distract from the hollow feeling in my chest. The program launched to immediate success. Local news covered it. Then regional news. Within a month, we were being featured in national education publications. I gave interviews. I spoke at conferences. The program director kept telling me I was the face of education reform, and I needed to embrace the spotlight. I tried, but it felt hollow without family to share it with. Then, 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, the profile piece came out in a major national magazine, The Teacher Revolutionizing Education for At-Risk Youth. My photo was on the cover. 5,000 words about my background, my teaching philosophy, my vision for education reform. And yes, my name was prominently featured. Alex Anderson, the teacher who walked away from a family manufacturing business to pursue his passion for education. The article mentioned my family once in passing. Anderson comes from a business-oriented family but chose a different path, one focused on service rather than profit. It was respectful. It wasn't critical of my family, but it made clear that I'd chosen something they didn't value. The article went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been shared millions of times. My inbox flooded with messages from other teachers, from parents, from students who'd been helped by programs like ours. And then the calls started coming from people I hadn't heard from in 6 weeks. My cousins, my aunts and uncles, and finally, inevitably, my parents. I didn't answer. I let them go to voicemail. But I listened to the messages, and the progression was fascinating. At first, "We saw the article. It's wonderful. We're so proud." Then, "We need to talk about what happened at Thanksgiving. We may have overreacted." And finally, "Please call us back. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake." But the call that really surprised me came from my father's business partner, the man who'd been like an uncle to me growing up. "Alex," the message said, "we need to talk about your father, about the company, about decisions that were made that you don't know about. It's urgent." That message I returned, because the fear in his voice told me something was seriously wrong. And what he told me explained everything. Frank Hutchins had been my father's business partner for 30 years, Chaiti. He was the financial mind behind the company while my father handled operations. And when I called him back, the first thing he said was, "I'm sorry, Alex. I should have told you years ago." "Told me what?" "About the company, about why your father pushed you so hard to stay." I met him at a coffee shop the next day. He looked older than I remembered, tired and worried. "The manufacturing industry is dying," he said without preamble. "Or at least traditional manufacturing like what we do. We've been losing ground for 5 years. Foreign competition, automation, changing markets. Your father refused to adapt, refused to modernize. He kept doing things the way his father did them." "I knew the company was struggling," I said. "That's part of why I didn't want to take it over. Why would I want to inherit a sinking ship?" "It's worse than struggling," Frank said grimly. "We're 6 months from bankruptcy, maybe less. Your father has been taking out loans, maxing out credit lines, trying to keep things afloat, but it's not sustainable." I felt cold. "Does my mother know?" "I think she suspects, but your father won't admit how bad it is. He's convinced he can turn it around, that he just needs more time, more capital, more—" Frank shook his head. "The truth is, the company as it exists now is finished." "What about Marcus? He's been running operations for 2 years. Does he know?" Frank looked uncomfortable. "Marcus is good with day-to-day management, but he doesn't have the vision or the capital to save it. And your father won't let him make the major changes that might help. He's too attached to the old ways." "So why are you telling me this now?" "Because of that article," Frank said. "Everyone in our business community read it. Everyone now knows that Robert Anderson's son is a nationally recognized education expert, someone who built something successful from nothing, someone with vision and drive and national media attention." Understanding dawned. They want me to save the company. Several investors have reached out. They're interested in getting involved, but only if there's fresh leadership, someone with a public profile, someone who could rebrand the company, take it in new directions. They've specifically mentioned your name. I don't want the company, Frank. I told my father that 2 years ago. I know, and I'm not asking you to take it. God knows you've earned the right to build your own life, but I thought you should know the full picture. When your parents disowned you at Thanksgiving, they weren't just rejecting your choices. They were reacting to their own fear and desperation. Your father saw the company failing and couldn't admit that maybe you were right to leave. Your mother saw their legacy crumbling and blamed you for not being there to save it. That's not my fault, I said quietly. I didn't make the company fail. No, you didn't. But in their minds, if you'd stayed, if you'd taken over when they wanted you to, maybe things would be different. Maybe your fresh perspective would have saved them. Frank sighed. It's not fair. It's not rational, but it's what they believe. And now the article comes out showing I'm successful. And suddenly they realize they pushed away the son who might have actually been able to help. Exactly. I sat back, processing this information. My father had disowned me while his company was collapsing. My mother had cut ties while watching their life's work circle the drain, and neither of them had been honest about why they were so angry at my choice to leave. What happens if the company goes under? I asked. Your parents lose everything, the house, their savings. All of it's tied up in loans and debts. They'll be forced to declare bankruptcy. At their age, starting over, Frank shook his head. It'll destroy them. And they think I'm going to ride in and save them now, after what they did? I think they're desperate enough to hope for exactly that. My phone had been buzzing constantly during our conversation. More calls from my parents, from my mother's friends, from my father's business associates. Everyone suddenly very interested in reconnecting with the son who'd been publicly disowned 6 weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't call my parents back for another week. I needed time to think, to process everything Frank had told me, to decide what I owed to the people who'd cast me out. The answer I kept coming back to was nothing. I owed them nothing. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that they were my parents, that despite everything, some part of me still loved them, still remembered the good times before the company became everything to them. Finally, I agreed to meet them. Not at their house. I couldn't go back there yet. At a neutral restaurant, midday on a Tuesday, when it would be quiet. They looked terrible. My father had lost weight. My mother had aged years in just 6 weeks. They sat across from me with expressions of desperate hope mixed with shame. "Thank you for coming," my mother said. "We weren't sure you would." I almost didn't. "The article was wonderful," she continued. "We had no idea you were doing such important work, that you'd achieved so much." "Stop," I said quietly. "Don't pretend you care about my achievements now. You made it clear at Thanksgiving that my work means nothing to you." My father flinched. "We were wrong. We were angry and scared, and we took it out on you. We shouldn't have—" "You disowned me," I interrupted. "In front of the entire family. You told me I wasn't your son anymore, that I'd be written out of your will. You made sure everyone knew I was a disappointment and a failure." "We didn't mean it," my mother whispered. "Yes, you did. Maybe not the words exactly, but the sentiment. You meant every bit of anger and resentment. You were just too proud to admit the real reason why." My father's jaw tightened. "You talked to Frank." "He told me about the company, about the bankruptcy, about why you were really so desperate for me to stay." "That's not—" my mother started. "Don't lie to me anymore," I said, my voice hardening. "You weren't pushing me to stay because of legacy or family duty. You were pushing because you knew the company was failing and you needed someone to fix it. You needed a savior, and I refused to play the part." My father looked down at his hands. "The company has been in our family for 3 generations. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's run its course. You don't understand what it means to watch everything you've built fall apart." "Actually, I do," I said. "I watched my relationship with my parents fall apart. I watched my extended family turn their backs on me. I watched you both choose a failing business over your own son." The silence stretched between us. Around us, the restaurant continued its quiet lunchtime service, oblivious to the reckoning happening at our table. "We want you to come back," my mother finally said, "to the family, to the company. Investors are interested if you're involved. You could save—" "No," my father looked up sharply. "You won't even consider it? After everything we've given you? After everything you've given me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You gave me life. You gave me a home and education, and I'm grateful for that. But I've more than repaid that debt. I spent 28 years trying to be the son you wanted, trying to fit into the box you built for me. And the moment I stepped outside that box, you threw me away." "We're asking for forgiveness," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We're asking for another chance." "I know," I said softly, "and maybe someday I'll be ready to give it. But not today. Not like this. Not when the only reason you want me back is because I'm suddenly useful to you again." "That's not fair," my father started. "Fair?" I stood up. "You want to talk about fair? You disowned me at Thanksgiving dinner. You made sure I knew that my value to you was conditional, that your love came with strings attached. And now that those strings might benefit you, you want me back?" I looked at them both. These people who'd raised me. These people who'd hurt me more deeply than anyone else could. "Here's what I'll offer," I said. "I'll agree to be your son again, to rebuild our relationship, but on my terms, not yours. We start from scratch. We go to family therapy. We address everything, not just the Thanksgiving dinner, but years of conditional love and impossible expectations. And most importantly, we separate me from the company completely. I will never be part of that business. That door is closed forever." "But the investors," my father said desperately, "will have to find another savior. I'm done rescuing people who don't actually value me." I left them sitting there, left them to face the consequences of their choices. And this time, I didn't look back. 6 months have passed since that Thanksgiving dinner. 6 months since my parents disowned me in front of everyone we knew. The company filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago. My parents lost the business, had to sell the house, and moved into a modest apartment. It's been devastating for them, especially my father. But you know what? They survived. They're still here. And slowly, very slowly, we're rebuilding our relationship. We go to therapy every other week. The sessions are hard. There's a lot of pain to work through, a lot of resentment and hurt on both sides. But we're trying, really trying this time. My mother admits now that she tied too much of her identity to the company, that she measured success only in money and legacy rather than happiness and fulfillment. She's volunteering at a community center now, and I can see her finding a new sense of purpose. My father is struggling more. Losing the company broke something in him, but he's starting to understand that maybe holding on so tight was part of what killed it, that refusing to adapt or change or listen to new ideas, including mine, was a fatal mistake. Marcus took a job with a different company. He's doing well. And we've gotten closer. He tells me he learned something from watching our family implode, that loyalty to an idea or a legacy can become toxic if it overrides loyalty to the people you love. As for me, the education program continues to thrive. We're expanding to 12 more cities next year. I've written a book about teaching at-risk youth. I'm being invited to speak at universities and conferences around the world. I'm building exactly the life I wanted. The life my parents told me was a waste. Some of my relatives have reached out to apologize, some haven't. I've forgiven some and kept my distance from others. I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when things are hard. The cousin who called to apologize after Thanksgiving? We're closer now than we ever were. The uncle who stayed silent? We haven't spoken since. Looking back on that Thanksgiving dinner, I realized that my calm response, telling them about my success right as they were casting me out, wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated revenge. It was just the truth, spoken at exactly the right moment to show them what they were throwing away. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't anger or violence or elaborate revenge plots. Sometimes it's just quietly succeeding at the thing they told you was impossible, living well, building something meaningful, refusing to let their rejection define you. My parents tried to make me choose between their approval and my dreams. They thought losing their approval would break me, that I'd come crawling back, desperate for their love. Instead, I chose my dreams. And when they realized what that choice would cost them, when they saw me succeeding without them, building a life and legacy that had nothing to do with their company or their approval, that's when they went pale. That's when they understood that by pushing me away, they'd lost not just a son, but someone who could have helped them, someone who had value beyond what they'd assigned to me. They learned, in the hardest way possible, that love can't be conditional, that you can't discard people when they don't serve your purposes and expect them to come running back when you need them. And they learned that sometimes the quietest words, spoken with calm dignity in the face of rejection, can be the most devastating response of all. I told them to remember that moment, to remember their choice. They will never, ever forget it, and neither will I.